So we'll go ahead and call this meeting to order. Welcome everyone to our November 15th Redistricting Commission meeting in Seattle. We would like to open this meeting with a land acknowledgement, and then we'll go right into reviewing our agenda for the meeting. We acknowledge that we are located on ancestral lands of the Coast Salish peoples, specifically the Duwamish, Squamish, Stulagamish, and Makusha tribes. And these are people that are still here and continue to honor their heritage. For those of us who are unfamiliar with the land acknowledgement, it is a traditional custom dating back centuries for many Native communities and nations. And for non-Indigenous communities, land acknowledgement is a powerful way of showing respect and honoring the Indigenous peoples of the land on which we work and live. With that, we will get this meeting started and review our agenda for the meeting today. And staff, if you could share screen to show the agenda. All right, this is our agenda for today. We'll do the functionary stuff of acknowledging receipt of written comments and any disclosures. You'll get an update on the submission of the final map that we made last week. And then we'll get into a discussion as a commission, just with overall process remarks and recommendations as we think about compiling an evaluational report that can come out of this effort. And then we'll talk about next meetings before we adjourn. With that, I will take a motion to approve the agenda or take any amendments.
Move the agenda as presented, Madam Chair.
Second.
Thank you. All those in favor say aye.
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 Any nays? Any abstentions? Majority carries and we have an approved agenda. We did receive the minutes from the last meeting, and I do hope that you got an opportunity to review those and read through them. Any motion to move adoption of the minutes?
So moved.
Any second?
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any nays? Any abstentions? The motion carries. We have approved minutes. With that, we still continue to receive written comments as of yesterday. So I do hope you have reviewed the comments we are receiving. I think most of what we're currently seeing is gratitude for the work, some feedback to the final map overall. So I will take notes confirming that you've received and reviewed the comments. Great. Any disclosures from commissioners? I don't see any. Okay. With that, we're moving on to the submission update. So staff were able to, as tasked at the last meeting, submit the final map, working closely with the city clerk and following all of the statutes guiding this process. I do understand that so far we are awaiting to hear from the city clerk if there has been any written acknowledgement to indicate receipt of our submission. but that is not to be a point of concern because we made all our submissions on time. We also had the city clerk actually physically drop off the map at the King County Elections Office this Monday. Elsa, would you like to shed any light in expansion to this update?
Just yay, big yay, on time. And yes, we are waiting for the clerk's office to let us know. There was probably a stamp receipt because she was personally there to deliver it and also submit it via email. So I just sent her a message earlier and I said, can you let us know maybe before the end of the meeting, but I will let you guys know today that we have a receipt, a written receipt of it, but there's no concern with that. And just for the public, also, we will be uploading information that we have, all of those documents to our website to make them available for everyone to access.
Well, thank you. Any questions from the commissioners on this? Commissioner Sullivan?
I was wondering if we got any clarity about the submitting it to the auditor versus the elections office.
I'm sure the auditor was thrilled, though
Right.
possibly confused.
Elsa, did you?
I'm trying to look the message so I can send it to you and see who do we send it. I will forward it to you for you to know. We submitted it, or the city clerk submitted it to King County, to Mrs. Wise, with copy to election services, and to council members, the mayor, also general attorney, city attorney, and then the rest is staff. So yeah, I will forward you this for you to know as well.
So the question that came up was last meeting, the state statute indicated that it should be submitted to the auditor, but the auditor in King County has a different role than the auditor in other counties, and so I think that's what led to the confusion.
Yes.
Yeah.
Most counties, it's a separately elected office, and it does very different things than the King County auditor.
I don't have the answer. Let me check quickly, maybe before the meeting.
Yeah, Ariel had her hand up as well. I don't know, Ariel, if you wanted to expand on that.
No, I didn't really have anything other than what Elsa was saying. So yeah, just to confirm, for King County, we checked it's King County elections. So we sent it off twice and are just waiting confirmation from the clerk on receipt.
Okay. Well, keep us apprised on what you land on that front. We are moving on to the next agenda item, which is the evaluation process. We filled out a form prior to this meeting to help us remember all the phases that we've all been in since 2021. Some of you with maybe slightly longer phases in the process, having started a couple of months ahead. With that, we're opening the floor. Also, I'm curious if the survey results are shareable, or if we should keep this as an open discussion and then can follow up with takeaways from the form.
I think the best way is to keep an open discussion right now, and then I will compile them into a document as we just received some of them. So, and the idea was just in general to just, like you just said, remember everything that has been done. There's been a lot of work, and for the public to know that we included in this evaluation all the way from advertising about how commissioners and how the public knows that these positions are available to apply for, and then the selection of the commissioners and all the way till today, which is evaluation. So it was more to spark your memory too, because you've done a lot of work. So I'd love to just hear general comments And if people want to go phase by phase, that's great. We'll be taking notes, but I'm hoping that a lot of your specific notes and comments are also in that document.
Great. Well, thank you, Elsa. We'll open the floor for discussions and ask commissioners to each share your thoughts on the process, your key takeaways, and some of your recommendations. Who would like to kick us off?
Everybody's being shy today.
Yeah. Commissioner Sullivan.
Yeah, well, so I guess one question I have about sort of thinking through this process is whether we want to separate this out into ideas and suggestions that might require an amendment to the city charter versus ideas and suggestions that could be implemented by staff. So I don't know if maybe we'll just talk about all the suggestions and then figure out which would require a charter amendment and which can be implemented. But I guess thinking back to early on in the process, I know we initially felt some concern about the delay in the start of the process because the city council had appointed commissioners without a whole lot of delay, but then it took the mayor longer than we hoped for in order to get a fourth commissioner. And until we had a fourth commissioner, we couldn't get a fifth commissioner. And so I think one of the things really early on in the process was to think through what steps could be taken or how to develop a process that ensured that we had a full commission a little earlier on. So I don't know if there's other thoughts or suggestions about that point in the process. And in terms of an actual change, like it might require some sort of a charter amendment indicating that if the mayor fails to appoint a commission member by a certain date, then there's some other step that can be taken. I don't know, but that there was a delay at the beginning of the process that I know that there were some of us who were hoping to get started earlier.
Yeah, and I would echo the need for a timeline to be attached to the appointment process. For folks who were applying for the fifth seat and how long it took, I think in the interest of keeping the public engaged, it's essential for us to have clear timelines of when decisions can be made. And that would require charter amendment. And I do think that our recommendations should be both. It should be both process oriented as well as some of the technical changes we need to see in the charter. Commissioner Nichols, you're about to chime in.
I was going to say, I think there was a unique circumstance in the mayor's second appointment. And I don't know that she held a process because I just got a call from her asking if I would serve. And I have this silly policy that if a mayor asks you, unless you have a really good reason, you should say yes. So I don't know what kind of a pool the mayor was drawing from or what, but I do know she had a second appointment in mind who she then hired for her staff. So that person was no longer eligible. So I'm not sure we're going to find that. Hopefully we don't find that in future redistrictings. I would say, I don't think we had too little time. I think we had plenty of time. And I mean, what happens in these processes is that they expand to meet whatever timeline they have. So I didn't feel particularly rushed those first 7 or 8 months. I thought we had good time. I thought we had plenty of time to engage with the public. And I think staff did a very good job of the early process of informing the community that this was happening, and then engaging the community through the public forums that we were required to do, and the public forums that we chose to do later in the process. So I think from that standpoint, we had enough time, and we had a good support system to be able to meet our charter duties.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Warris, and then O'Sullivan.
I think so. My comment is a little bit of like both of these things, and I think it's maybe a good segue that I waited for two of my colleagues to go first. I do agree that the lag in the former mayor's appointment did cost us about a month of work. And I don't think it necessarily slowed down existing work at that time, but I do think that what it did is it limited future conversations, particularly around the tool that we would be using for actually drawing the maps. So I particularly remember the conversation when we started talking about whether or not to use Dave's Redistricting as the platform. And ultimately, we came to the decision that we didn't have time to engage other consultants or examine other platforms because of that time between when we would be making the choice and when we had to start going into the public outreach plan. So I think it's like a more of like an opportunity cost more than it was a true like detriment to the work. And so my next comment really is focused on, I think we need a platform that is easier to use for the public. I think that Dave's Redistricting, while it is a incredibly powerful and well thought out tool, it is not user friendly and was prohibitive for many people in the city to use as a way to say, here's my map, without going through a training or without investing a significant amount of time. You know, I think that the app itself is a form of public service, and I'm so thankful that Dave has created it. But I also think that the city should be providing another platform for its residents to engage with that is less cumbersome and more accessible. And then my last thought on the top of my head is really about the fifth member. I think that at times the chairs, it would have been really valuable to have more of their input and participation in discussion without the role of the chair on them, particularly towards the end, right? So like, you know, Patience or Greg or whomever was the chair at the time, right? Folks couldn't motion their own maps. They couldn't second other options. And I think, you know, it is valuable for such a small group to have maximum participation in those moments. So I would love for maybe a conversation, or if it's not popular, that's cool too. But I think a non-voting fifth member who is the permanent chair to just run meetings might be a valuable midway point for that for us. So those are my three big things right now.
Well, thank you. Commissioner O'Sullivan?
Yeah, one other note about the early stage of the process. So there was a point in time when the initial four of us were working on considering a fifth member. There was some, I think, discussion and a lack of clarity about whether residents in the city of Seattle was a requirement to serve as a commissioner. And so I think it might be a good idea to clarify that. And I guess my thought would be that a city resident, residents probably should be required to qualify as a member of the commission. But I know there was some lack of clarity on that issue, and so clarifying that might be helpful.
Yeah. Thank you, Commissioner.
And one quick clarity to mine, I said a non-voting fifth member. I actually meant a non-voting sixth member. So my apologies.
Member.
Yes.
Okay. So that would be an amendment to the charter. Commissioner Shah?
think that would make sense. A non-voting 6th member whose job was, I found it hard when chairing to focus on both things at once. And it took a lot of preparation to chair. And so I agree with that. Just reflecting on the tools. I mean, one, I think we got an incredible amount of engagement. We got an incredible number of maps. So even though it wasn't perfect, I think it worked fairly well. And in 10 years, there'll be tools that are just like so much easier. I mean, I imagine that it'll be completely different and more people can, but a point taken. I still feel like even though we did so much engagement, I think there are some neighborhoods that didn't participate at all, which, or not at all, but very, hardly at all, which made it difficult because it seems like neighborhoods participate when there's a big change coming in their neighborhood, then they mobilize and they do something. And it made it difficult at the end when we had map submissions or amendments coming in quickly when those neighborhoods had never really participated. So I think the early engagement, while I think it's terrific that we focused in certain neighborhoods, I think maybe in all neighborhoods, specifically in all neighborhoods. The other thing that has troubled me, I think we got we started out with these 4 maps that were some computer generated and from the GIS consultants, and I don't think that they were very useful to generate. They didn't generate the kinds of specific public comments. So I feel like there was a sort of we got a lot of general this map, that map, but we were never intending to use any of those maps. So I wonder if there's something like each district creates a map and submits the map, and that's what you start with, or somehow a community-driven process where that's what you start out with the map. So you're already starting with participation from the community. That may be, I don't know, too difficult to do, but I didn't think that the way we did it generated the kind of feedback I was looking for. So it was once we heard all this public comment that I could really go in and say, okay, that neighborhood, let's shift that. Let that neighborhood said that, let's shift that. And you kind of have to hear all that, or I did anyway, needed to really hear from the community and understand the city before diving into making our own maps. So it was kind of a bit of a challenge of how to start the process for me.
Yeah.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner O'Sullivan.
Jumping off of Commissioner Juarez's comments, I do think it would be valuable to encourage the commission in 10 years to hire a consultant and include in that process that the consultant creates an interactive process that allows residents to submit their own maps so that we aren't relying on, like Dave's redistricting. At the very early stages, I was kind of hoping that was possible. It kind of turned out not really to be workable, or it seemed like it would be difficult to add that to the RFP that we were considering. Had we begun the process a month or two earlier, had we gotten all the commissioners on board, I think we might have had an opportunity to consider whether or not we could get bids from consultants who had the capacity to create an interactive application that allowed residents to submit their own maps. Also, another sort of charter amendment issue would be eliminating the term districting master.
Amen.
Yeah, amen to that.
Agree with that, yeah.
So just sharing, building on the thoughts that have been covered, the first one being on the computer generated maps. I didn't find those to help start a conversation. I think the commission can have some latitude, especially if we start early, to think conceptually about what they want to see in the maps, while cognizant of the fact that you need to listen to the community. You're also coming in with values and principles and some conceptual idea of what you would like to see in the maps. So I think if the initial proposal is not the computer generated conversation starter, which is why we didn't get as much public engagement right off the gate, people are able to react to something than just maps that are said to be hypothetical. So that would be one point of feedback to the computer generated maps. Elsa, are you raising a hand to respond to this?
Not just to that, but I had a question for the commission, and it has to do with when the commissioners were formed. So the Department of Neighborhoods put together an interdepartmental team to discuss how we're going to go about the whole redistricting process. And because it was new, we were all scrambling, getting information from the different processes around. But one question I have, if you would recommend this, the idea of, we put together this intensive outreach before the process started, so we could engage and educate the public on what was redistricting, so they could engage in the process later. But we couldn't start that process because we didn't have the commission ready. And so that impacted that process as well for us. And I wonder if what we could do is delegate whoever is, if it's the Department of Neighborhoods, to start that process, even if the commission is not formed yet. Because now we will be able to have and say what it was, what it is, what it means, but to maybe include it as to not wait until the commission is ready for a department to just start sharing to the public. This is coming up and engaging folks in the process, because that took us a lot of, we were ready to start, but we didn't have the commission and we needed to wait for it to be ready. So I would ask for a recommendation and your thoughts on that.
Yeah. I would echo my thoughts and say having the department go right ahead and begin to activate residents, being aware of the process, what the process entails, and what the possible tools could be, without being prescriptive in terms of what the commission will put forward. So you can allow the commissioners to be able to make decisions on their own. Commissioner Shah?
I was just going to say that I think that's, I support that recommendation that Elsa's stated. Because there's just an amount of sort of general information that about redistricting that's not going to change. The commission may want to then do this additional engagement, or let's try this, or have other ideas, but it doesn't mean you couldn't get started on the basics.
Yeah, agreed. Any other comments on Elsa's question, Commissioner Nichols?
Oh, I had a comment elsewhere in the process.
Okay. I'll complete my comments and say that I thought our outreach plan was really robust. Even though you waited to do this with the commissioners being in place, we really set an example of what outreach should look like in terms of how diverse the organizations we engaged were, and how far wide reaching you were across the city. So that was truly exceptional. And if we can share as much as we can from the process in our recommendations report for future commissioners to be able to learn from that, I think that'll be helpful. And then going back to the question of the 6th commissioner or having a consultant who's working with the commission, I think it's a good idea. It's really limiting for the chairs to be, especially in the final process, have amendments, have proposals, and find themselves in this Robert's rules world of not being able to move forward their own motions. Because I think I had that rude awakening at some point here myself. And I found that to be a little bit hard. But I think there's one thing to be said, though, about our shared leadership model that we created. And some of that should be somewhat preserved amongst the commissioners. There was value in having the rotation to an extent just be fully shared by all of the commissioners throughout the process. Commissioner Nichols, you had a thought.
I have actually a couple thoughts. One, I wanted to say thank you to the commission for your courtesy at our last meeting. We had a power outage that started across the alley from our house that ended up affecting 10,000 West Seattle residents losing power. And I know that was confusing. It certainly was to me. And I ended up having to speak to 4 maps from memory. And that was an interesting intellectual challenge. So thank you for your courtesy and patience in reconnecting by phone. And I think that's been a hallmark of our process. I think that even when we've disagreed, we have done so in a very courteous manner. And I don't think that courtesy hides the conflict, but I think it allows us to talk through and continuing to work together even when we happen to disagree. So I think that part of the process, that aspect of the process, I would really hope that future redistricting commissions would emulate. I do have a strong feeling about the legal advice that we got. And I'm not speaking to the individuals who gave the advice, because I think they were great and responsive. But I think the city attorney has adopted advice based on a case that involved the city council and a previous mayor in I think it was the head tax specifically. And the advice that the city attorney is giving to us, and I assume other commissions and the city council, I feel is absurd. I think it is absurd for us not to be able to talk to one another because it would constitute a public meeting. I agree, a majority of us shouldn't sit down in a room outside of a public meeting and talk. But I think one-on-one, we should be able to talk to each other very freely. And I think if we had been able to, I think we might have come up with a somewhat different product. And I'd like to think it would have been one I could have supported. But we were so constrained. And 2 meetings ago, I think our legal advisor said, when you're drafting sections of the resolution, don't CC the other commissioners. Well, that is absurd. And it doesn't hurt the public that we actually know what we're talking about because we've had a chance to communicate with one another. So I would really look to strongly advise the city attorney's office to change that and make it a much more common sense policy that they can then defend adequately in the future if someone complains, but allows commissions and the city council to more effectively move forward. Oh, and finally, the city software system sucks. I found it so difficult to use as an outside user using my computer. I felt like I got things late, even though the staff sent it out in a timely manner, but to access the city system was difficult, awkward, and at least and I've got like a 13, I use a laptop, and on my screen, I couldn't see the whole public comment sheet at the same time. So I'd have to scroll back and forth in order to get both the person's name and the date of when the comment was made. And with 3,000 comments, that's an awkward thing to have to do. So the future commission, I hope we spend a little bit of time prepping some tool that allows a commissioner, an independent commissioner, to be able to access the information in a more seamless manner. That's it.
Thank you, Commissioner. I think there are 2 commissioners wanting to respond or build on what you just shared, Commissioner Sullivan and Commissioner Sharp.
I actually wasn't gonna build on what Commissioner Nichols said, so if there's somebody who wants to respond, I can go off.
I was just going to respond that I also, we did all this on Zoom, so that made it even more difficult that we couldn't even, I mean, I think it's kind of amazing that we sort of built the relationships that we have and the collegiality all through a computer screen. And I imagine it might have been different if we were in person, but it did really make it difficult to understand what the other commissioner was trying to accomplish. Or so I tend to, I guess, play on the safe side, and the legal advice was so firm in what it was saying. So anyway, but I agree with Commissioner Nichols that I think there was definitely some lost communication there that may have made for a better process. And just on the technology piece, I don't know how you did it on a laptop. If I didn't have the bigger screen to like zoom in on things, honestly, it would be so difficult to do. I had a problem one day and had to call the city tech support that gave me terrible advice because we're not city employees, and I ended up losing a whole bunch of files off my computer and created a whole disaster. But being a commission and then not, I mean, maybe they should say, here's a city computer that you use, and then we're all connected in. And so I don't think, especially since you want us to keep everything so separate, hand over information, that we should be using our personal computers.
Thank you. Commissioner Warriors, I'm assuming you want to start a new topic so we can go to Commissioner South. Okay, let's
No,
go with
just
you first.
very quickly building off of Commissioner Shaw. And it has to do with how this is accessible to different people. I feel like requiring commissioners to use so much of their own technology, as well as being able to devote the significant amount of time that was uncompensated to the process, significantly limits the number of people that otherwise might be able to serve their community on this body. And I think that should be addressed in a number of ways, right? Whether that's compensation or, like was just suggested, using city computers. I think there's just a lot there to be done to make this a truly accessible space for more people. Because had any one of us just said, I don't have computer, I don't have reliable internet, I don't have a space in my home where I could conduct meetings as chair, right? All of those take somebody out, right? And how that gets addressed, I think, is not in the charter, but is ultimately probably at neighborhoods around, like, how do we support non-employee people who are essential to city function. Right. So that's all.
Commissioner Shaw, you want to?
Yeah, I mean, I would just say that should be a recommendation for all commissions. And as so much work is happening virtually now, I agree, it's inequitable, and it's also, yeah, ditto.
Thank you. Commissioner O'Sullivan?
Yeah, well, so one question I have is, I think this is valuable discussion, and I wonder what is going to be most valuable for, like, is there some concrete way in which we can pass agreed recommendations on? Like, should we develop a resolution suggesting charter amendments? Should we, or is it just going to be notes from this meeting? What would be a valuable outcome from this discussion? So that's sort of a question I have. And then I've got some additional comments on process, but maybe before we move forward, it might be useful to, I don't know if Chair, if you already have an idea about, or Elsa, what you're hoping for as an outcome from this discussion.
Elsa, do you want to kick us off?
Yes. So the first is that, as everything has been new, every single piece of this process is new, we are creating a record of how things should go for the next 10 years. And so we just finished our meetings with our clerk's office to see what kind of documents are we producing and saving for the next 15 years or so the next commission can use all of the documents that were used during this process. And so, first of all, because we want to create a great record of everything and document how it happened, and end it with this final piece, which will be recommendations from the commission. And I am hoping to divide it into, as you said, recommendations to change the charter, but also recommendations for departments that will impact budgets and plans way ahead of next 10 years, which would be all the way from getting the census results after the day we get the census results and after that. And so That is, for practical reasons, what we will create, a record for the next process. But also the question you have about a resolution for or recommendations for charter amendments, that would be a question. Nobody has done it before, so we could, you could make that, and we can put together everything that we hear from you in a document, and then make it official by you signing it. But that's also a question I would take from Ariel. We can do more research on that.
Commissioner Nichols?
Well, any charter amendments would require city council action. So it seems to me that one thing that might be useful from us would be a letter that kind of documents what we think would improve the process, both in terms of potential charter changes and other administrative changes, and address that to the mayor and the president of the city council. I will say, I think the council was great. I got no outreach from any council member on any part of our process. They really, at least from my perspective, kept a hands-off approach. There are a lot of jurisdictions where that would not have been the case. So I would, if we do a communication, I would thank the council for its respect for the independence of the commission and our process.
Agreed. Well, I would say that the letter should be incorporated into the report that we will produce as a final product. Because that should be timeless information that can be referenced back to and can be read alongside the definition of other processes that were part of the redistricting for this year. So I would move that we go in that direction. In terms of the charter amendments, I would encourage that the commission agrees. We have a consensus vote on the charter amendments overall that we will incorporate in the letter, but the recommendations to the departments can vary from individuals to us collectively speaking to specific changes that we would like to see or practices that we most effective. Commissioner O'Sullivan.
So I just had a couple more thoughts about process, and this is later on in the process. So one suggestion I have in the process, I mean, there's been a couple comments about the consultant-generated maps not being as useful as we thought they might. So I would be interested in having a process in which each individual commissioner comes up with their own map much earlier in the process, understanding that we won't have received a lot of public comment. But again, I think that would actually have been a better jumping off point for discussion, having commissioners suggest a map, again, with very little public comment, but acknowledging that and saying, you know, here's an idea, poke, 1,000 holes in this idea. This is just a starting point. And having so we had a process where each commissioner developed their own map at the very end of July, and then the very beginning of August, we came to a draft map as a commission. Having a larger gap in between the time when each commissioner develops their own map and when we come to a draft map, I think would have been helpful, so that we have more time to really understand each commissioner's map and why they came up with that map, and how we might combine them into a consensus map. And then having that draft map developed earlier in the process, so that we have more time between when the draft map gets developed and then the final map comes out. So those are some ideas that might have sparked some conversation.
Yep, certainly. Commissioner Shah, Commissioner Nichols, and then Boris.
I agree that if there was more time between, in the summertime and between the end, that would be useful. Depending on what your background is and what you're working on, I think coming up with a map for the city without hearing public comment would be not that useful. So for me personally, I feel like you'd have to have you'd have to hear some amount of public comment to come up with a useful map. Otherwise it would just be almost as random as what the 4 maps we started with. So some kind of balance within what we did and what you've suggested, I think would be useful.
I would agree with that. I don't think having 5 maps generated by each individual commissioner at the beginning would have been a very helpful thing, because I do think we need to do some listening first. I think that having each individual draft map earlier would make some sense. And I think having more of a gap between when we did that and when we picked a draft map to allow that kind of conversation flow in a more expansive way than we were able to this past summer, I think that would be very helpful to the process. I found the 4 maps to be helpful. I use them as a base for the map that I came up with at the end of July, throwing in one change that I thought would put us in a better position in future redistrictings with my I-5 boundary. But I found their maps to be very helpful in guiding that. And I thought it did engage some communities, but until we had something that was stamped and approved by the commission, I don't think we were going to generate a whole lot of additional engagement. So I think it served its purpose.
Commissioner Wars?
I'm in agreement with Greg and Malima on this one, where I think some slightly modified version of what Commissioner O'Sullivan is proposing is preferable for me. I think the other piece that goes kind of hand in hand with it is I think that when we went into the retreat with our own maps, I think it would have been really valuable for us to have agreed upon a process for deliberation prior to the retreat, so we knew how to approach each other's maps to have, I think, a better, more fruitful conversation. Because I think it was a little bit like we got the ball rolling and then we went and we got to a good place. But the intentionality of setting some parameters of like, here's how we're going to have a discussion, here's how you're going to present your map, and here's how we're going to decide on, where we start drawing the lines, right? We chose South Seattle, but I think that was just a process of like, we started with District 1 numerically. Had we flipped a coin, we might have started in District 4, So those kind of things, I think, also help the public understand how our conversation is going to go, so that they can also give really rich public comment for us to review. But I do think that our maps were introduced, debated, and then we came to a consensus map in such a short amount of time that like I truly didn't get to engage, I think, as long as I would have liked, which maybe is the theme for this whole process, is like none of us had enough time on anything. But like I would have loved to have those maps just simmer a little bit longer so we could hear community on it, we could hear each other on it. But yeah, process.
Yeah. Well, I would agree with Commissioner O'Sullivan, but added the recommendation to say that early on, have the consultant move forward with some draft maps, however they're generated, but get feedback from the commission in terms of high level. These are your values, these are your principles, here's the vision you have for the map overall, and have what's published to the public be informed by the discussions that the commission would have had early on. Because we're not folks coming in with a blank slate, we're coming in with specific thoughts on what the direction of the process should be, even though we're cognizant of wanting to listen to the community and be sure that the process is truly driven by community. So I would recommend some hybrid version of having the consultant draw some maps with feedback from the commissioners, which of course I also realize would match up the timeline overall getting the maps out. I do agree with the point of having the commissioner individual maps come out early. I think it would have been really appreciated to have as much time to debate back and forth on what is the intent of each map as we were reviewing so far. Commissioner O'Sullivan.
So I have a question for Ariel about the process yet to come, which is if I've read the comments correctly, it seems that there is a potential legal action brewing, and so I'm interested to know what the commission's role is in the event of a legal action challenging the map.
Is this a conversation? If you're talking about potential litigation, is this something you'd like to talk about in an executive session, or?
I mean, we certainly could have an executive session at our December 6th meeting, but I mean, I think just knowing what, like, do we play a role at all? Do we have to, does the commission come up with some sort of a response? Is this entirely in the realm of the city attorney's office? Just like, or not like responding to a specific lawsuit, but just in general, what is the commission's role in the context of a lawsuit challenging our map?
Gotcha. Well, hypothetically speaking, if the map is challenged, let me pull up the RCW. It goes to the judge to review it. And so, you know, it's up to the judge. If the judge is directing the city of Seattle to submit a different version of the map, the city of Seattle has no way to draw that map without the commission, since you're the body empowered to be drawing the map. So hypothetically speaking, we would be having conversations with you as redistricting commissioners in the event that the map is challenged about next steps.
Okay. Well, thank you for emphasizing the hypothetical point. Commissioner Shaw.
Thank you, Chair. That was one other point. I think that in nominating commissioners, it should be very clear. It should be clearer about what the time commitment is, what the role is. I have to say, maybe it's my bad for not reading the fine print, but I didn't realize that this commission, when the map was submitted, doesn't ever disband. So, you know, I'm not planning on doing redistricting in 5 years or whatever. That's not, who knows what we'll be doing, but that, you know, that details like that should be made more clear, and the expectation of time overall. I mean, if we were meeting in person weekly and you had to commute to downtown and everything, depending, I mean, I think you're really limiting who you're selecting to be part of this process. There's also a lot of assumptions about people's experience going into a commission like this. I think it worked well for the commissioners who are selected here, but if you really wanted to have a more diverse pool of people, they might not have the same knowledge of the entire city. They may come from a specific neighborhood. They may, you know, not know Robert's rules as well as the others. So I think there's just some, we went in with a lot of expectations of commissioners' ability to just kind of jump in and do it. And I don't think that would be the case for all folks participating if you wanted to have a widely, a more open process. I also was, you know, contacted by the former mayor's office, and I wouldn't have had, if I didn't receive that call, I wouldn't have had any idea about the process. I didn't see anything from the city of Seattle. I get a lot of emails from the city of Seattle. So I'm thinking, if I never received any of that information, you know, it didn't go out very broad.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Warren.
I haven't thought through this comment, so bear with me. But it does spark some interest in the two of us that were appointed by the city council had a fairly public process, right? We had to apply, we answered questions in front of council, it was televised. Those that were appointed by the mayor did not have that process mirrored, right? So I think there is value in the mayor's appointments. I think my personal value on that is that there should be a more robust public aspect of that process. I'm not quite sure where I'm going with this. I just want to spark a conversation because it seems uneven and it seems maybe antithetical to like how we have operated. I don't think we would have come up with that process.
Yeah, we did have to submit an application and go through the process, but we didn't have a televised situation. And
Well-
neither were the interviews. I guess they were on Zoom.
Well, so
Yeah.
it seems like maybe Commissioner Nichols did not have a application.
No, I got a call from the mayor and I did fill out some paperwork based on that, but she asked me if I would do it, and sadly I said yes.
But normally for most commissions, the application process is open to all, and then the selection process is divided up between the executive office and council. So it's often through application.
And I think the mayor had an idea of what she wanted in her appointee. She has served herself on a redistricting commission previously, I think, for the state. So she certainly knew what the process would look like and feel like, and what she would like to throw in the mix.
Yeah. All right, we are a couple of minutes over time on this agenda item. I do want to close us off by saying that while we're talking a lot about the things that didn't go well, a lot of things went really well with this commission. First of all, just the collegiality, the human beings on this commission, and how reasonable and committed people were to doing the best job that we could do, and commitment to building consensus overall. And that's why I'm proud of the map that we ultimately got to. And I think the first good decision you made was the 5th commissioner. Not too loud, no. But absolutely, it's been fantastic to work with all of you. And I think we lucked out on staff who were just so supportive and present and technical to the detail. Dennis, I see you have your hand up on this one.
Hello, commissioners. It's been a while. I've been in the background observing for the past few weeks, and I just want to say congratulations on completing your task successfully. Thank you for the opportunity that you gave us to support you. You've made many of the same recommendations and observations in this discussion that I had jotted down, notably that you could consider changing the order of how you do things. You could consider creating your own commissioner maps, one per commissioner, or some sort of hybrid therein. And I think those are all valid things for the next commission to consider. Also, someone early on made the observation that the technology 10 years from now is likely to be easier to use and different. I can't give you a good foretaste of what that's going to look like. I don't think I'll be around to see it, at least not in a professional capacity. But I do think whatever happens, it's likely to be easier for the public to participate, easier for the commissioners to do some of their own proposal work. And so, you know, that is definitely going to be something to watch. Just an observation that the Seattle School Board has the same number of board members and underwent a similar process in roughly the same timeline. I don't know if you may want to consider coordinating with them in 10 years or not, or if there are any legal ramifications to doing that, but something to think about. And again, I want to just say thank you for the opportunity to support you in this. And I want to stop talking now and bring out the true star of the show, who is Mary Ulrich. Thank you, Mary, for all that you did.
Yes.
Thank you, Mary.
You guys are welcome. It was a pleasure to work with all of you, given the strangeness of our circumstances of having to work over Zoom and utilizing a technology that was unfamiliar to all of us. Even though Dave's redistricting did have a bit of a steep learning curve, it proved invaluable to creating a final product for all of you. And like I said, it was really great working with every one of you.
Thank you, Mary.
Thank you, Mary. You were a rock star. Elsa, then Commissioner O'Sullivan.
Dennis kind of took my point because I really wanted to make a point to thank our technical team, because it was really great to work with both of you in general. Mary, you're great to work with working with people who know nothing about what you do. It was great. And certainly to Dennis and the team, who was great at, just helping us deliver something on time and great. But Mary, we know it was Mary, and we appreciate that. And how as humble as, key people are, I also want to extend my thanks to Logan, who has been in the background, literally doesn't want to come on camera ever. Because without him, we would have not been able to manage those 3,000 public comments to get them to you. And every single thing that we've done, there he is. He exists. And you remember he's the tallest of the crowd, I think. So just thanks to him for all the background work. I want to thank all of you for the patience, because this was a crazy new project for all of us. And trying to look very professional and knowing what we're doing was really difficult at times, because we did not know what was next. So we had to ask a million people, and then most people didn't know what was the next step. So we had to create it. I want to thank Ariel, who also, we were working so close. I've never worked so close to a lawyer ever in my life, asking questions about, is this correct? Is this? So learning that process was intense, and I'm very thankful. And to all of you, I'm really thankful. At the beginning of the meetings, if you go back to the recordings, all the talking was done by me. And at the end, I barely talked, and that was the goal. And that was what you can call a successful staffing of a commission, when you took and became the actual people to run the project. And so it was a pleasure to play and work with you, becoming a chair and staffing as a chair for each one of you. I thought the other day somebody asked me, so how was it like? And it was great, because I had a million bosses. I had a million people directing traffic with different styles. And I don't know anybody who's more committed and loves the city as much as you do, because that was a lot of work. And I appreciate you. It was a great process. We can write a whole story, and I'm ready to tell more about how it was in the background. And hopefully the report will show that it was a pleasure. It was great. And I said at the beginning, we have our very first and very constant public commenter in the room who brought us donuts. So just wanted to have it in the record. So Greg Petrie is in the room, and we didn't have that many people in person, but Greg was one of them. And thank you for being here. We appreciate every single person who participated, who came to the public comments, to every single event that we did. It was a pleasure to work with all of you. It was hard, and we hope to see you in more activities as we engage with the post-redistricting education that we are hoping to be doing. So thank you.
Thank you, Elsa. Commissioner Nichols, I know Commissioner O'Sullivan, you also had your hand up earlier. So we'll start with Nichols and then come back to you.
I just wanted to add to Elsa's very eloquent thank yous, that I appreciated the support that Logan provided when I got lost in the technology. I also wanted to note that of the 3,700 comments, one was from Logan. While I didn't necessarily agree with his perspective. I really appreciated the fact that he was willing to make a comment, just like every other citizen in the city who chose to, because he cared about what the outcome might look like. It didn't affect in any way his professionalism in supporting the commission, but I just thought it was kind of a classy touch.
Thank you. Commissioner Sullivan, then Commissioner Shaw.
Yeah, well, I just wanted to agree that one of our best first decisions was appointing Commissioner Malaba, and then another terrific decision that we made early was hiring King County GIS, and Dennis and Mary have just been phenomenal to work with. So I worked with Mary on many Fridays, putting together different maps, and she was always so responsive and so capable, and made it happen so seamlessly. That was really made it a great experience. So thank you to Dennis, thank you to Mary, and Elsa and Logan, who were providing terrific support. So I made this process so enjoyable.
Commissioner Shaw.
Echo that. I don't want to forget about Elsa, that Elsa, you made this whole process run from the beginning, and or the backbone, I think, of this on the city and the Department of Neighborhood side. So thank you so much. You've been an absolute pleasure to work with. We couldn't ask for somebody, talk about someone dedicated to the city, dedicated to outreach, dedicated to inclusiveness and equity, transparency, all these things. So thank you so much, Elsa. Keep working on all these issues. I know it's in your heart.
Oh, thank you, Commissioner Shaw. Commissioner Juarez, are you adding on to the thank yous? Please feel free to.
Yeah, super quick. I think all of us we're public service gadflies, right? We show up in a lot of different places, and the staff and the support from Ariel to Dennis, Mary, Logan, Elsa, everyone. I don't know that I can recount a time in which I had like deep belly laughs with every single person that was supporting the project, except for this one. And public service can be joyous, and it can be productive, and it can be professional. And I just really appreciate that about all of you, because even though we were talking about serious, hard stuff, and we were trying to figure out hard things, like I know I'm going to remember from this process laughing with all of you. And I like that we can do hard things and have a good time doing it. So thank you all for your service.
Yeah, thank you, Commissioner Juarez. You brought the joy. I do want to pile on the thanks and wrap us up. And then Commissioner Shaw, I will recognize you. Elsa, I'll start with you and just thank you for the exceptional embodiment and commitment to this work. I remember our first call when you were communicating about the 5th commissioner role and appointments and the interviews. You just made it seem like the simplest process to engage in. That GIS was the lightest thing for me to learn in just a couple of weeks. And you lived up to that throughout the whole process for all the commissioners. And I deeply appreciated that. I think you were very reassuring to all of us in terms of the level of support we're providing. But this is also work of passion for you individually. And we're lucky as a city to have you and have Logan working in support with you. Logan was exceptional in information organizing. I have not seen someone who's as organized as he's been in terms of public comment compilation. It would not have been easy to read the 3,000 plus comments if we didn't have the level of being organized that Logan brought into this work. So deeply appreciate all that. And the GIS team, Dennis and Mary, we deeply appreciated how easy you made this feel. Mary, in all of the sessions that we had, all the streets in Seattle, I am perplexed. So that's really, truly impressive that you know every corner of the city of Seattle. And in both of you, we just had a great amount of resource, and we deeply appreciated how much you provided the technical support that made this easier for the public to digest, for the public to engage. And we have the most equitable map that we'll ever have as a city because of the dedicated work that you put forward. So I want to thank you for that. And I won't forget our legal counsel. I know, Ariel, that there's been days when folks have felt frustrated about the feedback on legal compliance, but I knew that you came from the right place on making sure that we were not liable for any part of this process. We're being compliant, and you did that with so much grace, with so much support, and you were always available. With some of the chair meeting preps, when we had questions, we would call Ariel and she would come on the call, readily available and providing very pointed feedback in that very moment. So we're really grateful for your service to the city and for your support of this process. With that, Commissioner Shah, over to you.
Absolutely. Agree with you on all those comments. I hope that sometime once, maybe in January or February, that we'll all get together in person and actually talk more about the process and do some small celebration somewhere. Since we've, in this whole process, met each other, I think, one time in person, and that, you know, that was a pretty important meeting. We didn't have a lot of time to connect with each other. So I would appreciate that.
That'd be fantastic. So Elsa will follow up with you on a possible future in person. But with that, we're moving along on our agenda items. Elsa, I will let you share your thoughts here before we talk about next week's meeting and other dates.
I just want to give you an update that I've received confirmation from the clerk's office that the materials were received. So this is it's been received by the appropriate people. So congratulations, yes.
Thank you for that update. So our next meeting is December 6th. Is that correct, Elsa?
That's what we have in the calendar, yes.
That would mean we have one more meeting already scheduled. And we do have to conclude our evaluation report based on the feedback you provided in this meeting and what you submitted in the forms and anything else that you can email Elsa after. We also have to finalize the public education plan as follow-up. We already have a plan that staff have been working on, and they can present that to the commission and talk about getting that out of the door. We also have to wrap up the commission, as Commissioner Shah was indicating earlier, that we were not cognizant of the commitment being somewhat perpetual, and we need to think about what the wrap-up approach should be. So we'll discuss that at the next meeting. So is December 6th the right timeline? Commissioner Wars, I see you have your hand up. And if you could speak to your thoughts on the dates as well.
Yeah, so I mean, I guess we're not all down for 10-year terms, but I'm okay with that. No, I appreciate setting some limits on our commitment here. So first and foremost, that should be the priority. I also feel like the 6th is fine. I want to get more clarity on the expectation. Are you looking for us to draft these recommendations? Is staff going to do that and we're reviewing at that meeting? What is the ask here?
So staff is compiling based on what you've submitted in the survey form that you received last week. And if you haven't seen that, we can resend. And then based on the discussions from this meeting, they will also compile some recommendations. And then I am asking commissioners if you have additional thoughts coming out of this meeting that you would like to share with staff, please do that as well. Yes, Commissioner Nichols.
Following up on Commissioner Wars, so is the 6th the last meeting we are contemplating? I mean, other than a social a meeting that Commissioner Shaw mentioned, which I think is a great idea. it kind of seems like we should be able to come to closure.
On December 6th.
I would hope so.
Possibly, depending on how much we spend discussing items, but December 6th will be ideally a good last meeting. Unless we want to make an addition to December 15th, I think is the other date. Elsa, which I see some reactions to that. Elsa, if you want to speak to the dates.
Yes, since we don't have anything that there's a deadline, legal deadline at the moment for any of these documents, and I want to give enough time for you to think about it. I want to suggest considering having that meeting in person together, and then finalize those details with some business with the report. That will give us a lot of time to put it together, to work with. The one piece that it's left that you've delegated staff to find out is we have to contract a communications firm that can deliver some the post-education messaging for the future, and some of that. December 6th is definitely, that gives enough time to give all of that, but if you wanted to do it even the beginning of January to give a break, that would be okay too. There's no rush on the recommendations and all of that needs to happen. So if you wanted to, and we can put those two together, finalizing business and do a social event, we can try to do that. That's my suggestion, but I am open to also meeting on the 6th and finalizing business, and then planning a more social event in the beginning of the year.
Yeah. Well, I will start off with saying that December 6th seems like an ideal place to wrap up business in 2022, but open to hear what folks have to share. Commissioner Shah?
Oh, I like the idea of combining it, wrapping up business and then already being together and doing kind of some type of celebration together.
Mm-hmm. Anybody else?
Are you thumbs upping December 6th, or we're meeting in January?
Sorry, that was way too vague. I am thumbs upping the December 6th, being together, getting it done, and hopefully wrapping it all up.
Uh-huh. Okay. Any other thoughts on December 6th and wrapping it all up?
Sounds great.
Great.
So clarifying, are you saying that we would meet in person on December 6th, or we'll just wrap up the business and then? I'm fine either way. That might be easier.
Yeah.
A lot happening in the next couple months. So.
I would think December 6th, we wrap up all of the recommendations and writings virtually. Mm-hmm. And then Elsa works with the commissioners to determine what other date we can meet in person.
That's fine.
Okay. All right, so then we'll be meeting on December 6th. And if folks have any other thoughts, please send them Elsa's way on recommendations. I'm going back to the agenda, and I think that was the last agenda item. With that, I'll take a motion.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any nays? Any abstentions? The motion carries. At the end of this process, I've mastered Robert's rules. Thank you all so much.
Happy Thanksgiving, everybody.
Yeah.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.